Yes.
How are you doing?
Get to see what this
Montgomery County sponsored tree taxes.
Do the summer parties. Like, I don't know why, I apologize.
And I always want to log into my sites to follow those. Those out,
yeah, it's best to
just be uninformed.
yeah, we gotta live your life too. It is
With the split.
Right, little, get in play here. First in-person meeting of the Texas Judicial Council is 2 years. And we'll come over. Here.
Judge Keller. Ms. Bash.
I'm here.
Mr. Bryant.
I'm here.
Justice Coy.
Here.
Ms. Clayton. Senator Creighton. Mr. Gimbel.
Here.
Judge Gravel. Judge Laird.
Here.
Representative Leach. Judge Maderi. Judge Miskell.
Here.
I'm here.
Judge Nash. Judge
I'm
Person.
here by phone.
I'm here, T.
Ms. Rax. Chief Justice Raddick. Judge Sawyer. Here. Representative Smith. Judge Spillane.
here.
Justice Wise.
Here.
Senator Zafreen. Please.
Well, welcome again. As a reminder, the meeting is being webcast live this morning and will be recorded and archived. So return to it and others can see it later. We have 2 new members, Zena Bash, who just responded on the phone. She's a founding partner in the Texas Office of Keller Postman and has done a lot of things. She was senior counsel for the Texas Attorney General, senior advisor to the White House Counsel, special assistant to the President of the United States, senior counsel to the U.S. Senate Judiciary Committee, and a law clerk to Justice Alito and then Judge Kavanaugh. She's got a bachelor and JD degree from Harvard and an MBA from Portland. So welcome, Zena. We're glad to have you. And next is Jennifer Coy of Houston. She's a partner at Jackson Walker and chair of the appellate department. She was a judge on the First Court of Appeals for a while, practiced at Baker Botts and also at Gibson Dunn. She was a law clerk on the 10th Circuit and also on the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court. And it has her BA for Princeton and her JD for Harvard. So welcome to both of you. And we're pleased that Governor Abbott has sent us some strong people for the council. Congratulations due to Senator Zaffarine for receiving the Laredo Webb County Bar Liberty Bell Award a few days ago. I don't think we ever properly thanked David Slayton for his service to the council, to the Office of Court Administration, and to the state of Texas. Because he left in the middle of all of our difficulties and meetings. But David is doing well. He and I were on a panel a couple of weeks ago in Los Angeles, and he's still doing what he loves and helping manage court services around the country. So we're very pleased that David has done well, and we're grateful for his contributions to Texas. And we're very glad to have Megan Leroy at the OCA helm. Megan worked closely with David for years and years, and is very well versed in the issues that we face, particularly on your side of the street, Senator. And so she's been working hard. David told me as he was going out the door that implementing Senate Bill 6 was impossible and it couldn't get done. And he was sorry to leave us in the lurch, but he couldn't do it if he was here. And Megan's gotten it done. We were just asking the wrong person. Yeah. So it's the first time we met her in 2 years, and it was just 800 days. I was telling them last night that at a meeting that the pandemic, that the disaster was declared, pandemic started. March 4 was the first case in Texas. March 13, Friday the 13th, was the disaster decree in the country and in the state, and our first emergency order. And now I think we're working on a draft of emergency order 51 this morning. And so we've tried to give the courts the flexibility they needed, the guidance they needed, particularly in the worst parts of the pandemic, in the Delta parts and Omicron, where judges just don't usually have contact with health authorities. We don't have any reason to. And we have to be in contact with them every day. And again, thanks to our State Department and the 5 doctors who are heading that up, who were just constantly available to us. One of my friends on the federal bench here in Texas, and I have several, as you know, these days. But one of my friends on the federal bench called and said, we just can't get the CDC to tell us anything. And we're struggling with the same problems you've got. And so we hooked them up to the extent they wanted it with the state groups. And so there was a lot of working together through all of that. I think through it all, I was proud, have been proud of the Texas judiciary. I think they stood to the challenges across the board. We have 3,220 judges in Texas, and there were many personal challenges for them, family challenges. We lost a couple along the way, very good judges to the virus. And so they worked very hard, and the challenges remain. We'll be talking about some of those today. One of them is backlogs. So we've got about 157,000 cases backlogged in the 484 district courts. And we've got about 30,000 in the 274 plus county courts, because some of the constitutional counties set. And the biggest part of the problem is jury trials. We're pretty much caught up. Well, we're completely caught up on the courts of appeals due to a lot of hard work by those 80 judges. And they started out behind like everybody else did, and they caught up. So have the JPs, so have the municipal courts. We're caught up in juvenile cases. We're catching up in family and civil cases, and we're way behind in criminal cases, pretty much felony cases, and mostly because of jury trials. Some of our counties are caught up. Collin County's caught up. No surprise there. El Paso County is caught up. That might be a surprise because they were pretty hard hit. But they are, and several others. Others are trying to make it up. And so we'll be talking about today ways that we can help them do well so we can have a good report session on how the judiciary is doing. So that's kind of an overview of where we are, and we have a long meeting this morning to get through, and we'll try to keep on schedule. But please feel free to discuss anything that we need to. You've had a chance to see the minutes of the last meeting, and are there any corrections, objections, discussion about the minutes? We'll adopt them by acclamation and go to the reports and action items. And the first is the Civil Justice Committee update. Jen Miskell is our new chair.
So we had a lot to get through. We met twice. We met on March 30th and April 15th. And specifically, we went through each charge that the committee has been given from the council. So the first charge was to monitor remote proceedings within the state judiciary and recommend any necessary reforms. We talked at length. Basically, our entire first meeting was focusing on remote proceedings and the pros and cons and sort of how they're going from all levels. One of the things I like best about this council is we have input from so many different roles within our judicial system. And at the end of the day, I think there was a general consensus that the special feature of the Judicial Council is that we can work with other stakeholders. So we're not a group of just lawyers or just judges. And so our special opportunity is to work with the legislature, with other divisions within government, to recommend that courts continue to be able to make remote appearances available where appropriate to increase access to justice and the efficiency of our courts. And so obviously there's more discussion to be had on that, but there was a general feeling that remote proceedings can be appropriate for some types of activities and can help increase access to justice and our courts' efficiency, and that can be good. Our second charge was to monitor the Texas eviction diversion program and recommend any necessary reforms. I had heard some gossipy reports about fraud within the system. We requested an update from Judge Chu, Judge Nash, who is also on our council, and heard that while any government program can have hiccups, that on the whole, that was not a pervasive or a large problem, and that there wasn't any action item for our council to do at this time with respect to that program. Everybody recognized that a lot of the work had been done on that program and seems to be functioning as intended. Charge number 3 was considering best practices for the judiciary and compiling lessons from the pandemic. So specifically, we heard an update on backlog, as we've heard this morning, and general discussion on the best ways to help our courts get through that backlog. So anything from collecting and publishing data, providing training opportunity on best practices for efficiency, any resources, and also publishing successes, because we have had a lot of judges and court success coming through that pandemic. Charge number 4 is study the landscape of the Texas civil justice system and recommend necessary reforms to improve access to justice. Specifically, what we heard about in our April meeting was the new changes with CPS reporting. So we've always had a lot of, or not always, but we have had a lot of data about court-appointed counsel in criminal cases. We typically have not had any data about court-appointed counsel in CPS cases, and that is a large source of spending at the county level. And so now there was some new legislation to provide for counties to report this court appointment data to TIDC, and we're starting to get that first reporting in. I think that started in November. So we got an initial preview of some of that data about court appointments. Obviously, counties are still working to implement it. The main thing that came out of our meeting, so we will continue, there is a Senate committee, I guess, working on the CPS data. So we definitely want to make sure that we work with that special Senate committee. And then also there is federal funding to reimburse for court-appointed attorneys in CPS cases, and only like 11 out of our 254 counties are accessing that federal money. And so one of our action items was to work with DFPS to streamline the procedures to get these contracts, to get the federal, it's called 4E reimbursement, and make counties aware that there are federal funds to get. So that probably was the area that had the most action items that our group can work on. Was there anything else from anyone that was in the committee meeting that you want to add? Okay, that's our update.
Questions? Just, Judge Miskel. All right, very good before. I'll just add that eviction diversion started with encouragement by the governor to our court. He diverted some federal money to us and gave us $1 million for legal aid. The program didn't work very well because we thought it would be better to administer it locally instead of statewide, and that turns out to have been wrong. So then when we went from that pilot to the big program, we did it the other way, and the court changed the rules in JP court so that the court, the judge and the court officers had to advise parties, landlords and tenants about the availability of the program and have to sign up before we get the money. And that program was, I think, the most successful one in the country. We gave away all the money, and so did New Jersey, and so that's not be a surprise. So did New York, a couple other states, and a lot of states didn't. And so I went back and asked the White House and DOJ and the Department of Treasury to give us some of the money that was not spent, and they did, both to the state and to local governments. I'm not sure how much Texas has gotten from this administration, but it's probably a short list. But they sure helped us on this, and to very good end. So yes, as Judge Miskel says, there will be glitches here and there, and some of them are serious, but it worked very well. So next, report from the Public Trust and Competence Committee, Judge Spillane.
Right, we committee met on April 7th and remotely, and we have 3 charges. On the first charge, on study ways to improve racial justice, equity, and inclusion in the justice system. We heard from Edwin Bell, who's the Director of Racial Justice, Equity, and Inclusion at the National Center for State Courts. He outlined a new program called the Blueprint for Racial Justice and an assessment tool that they're creating to assist the judiciary in outlining the immediate and recognizable steps towards improving racial justice, equity, and inclusion in the justice system. The goal of the blueprint is to ensure all court users, litigants, community members are heard, listened to, and have access to the nation's justice system, focusing on outcomes. He mentioned that he understands we often bear the brunt of people's disdain or upset, being upset about injustice, and we don't control the cases that are filed in our court. We don't really control always in terms of diversity of the general bar. We may have some influence on that, but they will try to look at outcomes and also work with, he listed several concrete steps that they're going to look at to help increase access and look at equity with courts, ability to pay hearings, how those are offered. He wants to try to really get actual court data on race from courts, working on a tool and that assessment tool to try to increase diversity of the bench, law clerks, and court staff. And also, and he thought the Judicial Council is a great tool for this, just increase the conversation between community members, judges, courts, and obviously members of the bar and other interested parties. On the second charge of monitoring court case backlog due to the pandemic, develop best practices, Angela Garcia presented to our committee on the court backlog issue. And I know we're going to hear later about that as well. Then our third charge is continue to monitor public trust and confidence in the Texas judiciary and recommend any necessary reforms to increase public support and respect. Jesse Rutledge from the National Center for State Courts talked to us about their annual poll. They took that in October 2021. They were helpful. We did a poll, I think 2018, of Texas, working with them. But they do a national poll almost every year. And he outlined that public trust measures are the lowest since the National Center of State Courts have begun tracking confidence indicators. I think it went from 73 to 64% public confidence. He noted that that has been consistent with many government entities after the pandemic or during the pandemic. Many respondents indicated the barriers to getting to the courthouse exist, and 2/3 are very comfortable using video technology, and they're eager to use that. They stated that the shorter, like a traffic ticket or a hearing that's kind of limited in terms of time works best, as we've seen as well. And he mentioned one interesting thing, on the digital divide, that it seems to be more of an age factor. It's more older citizens are more concerned about the digital versus it's not necessarily in terms of indigency and other factors, to the extent that this poll could indicate. But that was one conclusion he said. A clear majority would like to see remote hearings continue. Finally, he said that most citizens, their interaction is through jury duty, traffic cases, and then family law cases was the third in terms of the number of interactions citizens have with the courts. In terms of next steps, and we only had one meeting, but I know our next meeting we're going to try to focus on one clear-cut recommendation that we wanted to focus was to further expand the judiciary's role in civics education. We'll focus on different options. I remember we did have a bill before that that was not successful, but that may be an option. And obviously, Senator Zaffarini, we want to build on all that she's done in terms of community engagement with the courts. And that's what we'll discuss next meeting. That's it.
Questions, Judge Dwight? I'll say, I wish you would look at this, Judge, in the next meeting. Back 2 years ago, we were pretty far along toward thinking about having a kind of a consultative group on diversity. So I met with Gary Bledsoe and several lawyers that he invited. And I was going to meet with the Hispanic bar, and Asian bar, and other groups to make sure we kind of covered the waterfront, and then think about maybe we should have a kind of a standing group to monitor what's happening out there so that the next crisis that comes along doesn't just catch us all flat-footed and we can say, well, we've got this group and they're working. So we should think about that. And the only reason I stopped, I think I met with them in December of 19, and then COVID shut us all down, and I just never did get back to it. But that might be something we want to.
One thing we did do during the pandemic, and I forget the title, is it Together We Dine, but it's a program where people have lunch. Is that what it's called? Together We Dine. And we did it remote. We did it at our computers, and it was just judges around the state, but it was
Really
very eye-opening and a great discussion. And I don't know if they're back to in person or
No,
not, but
I mean, they're still meeting. It's
Yeah.
pretty interesting.
makes sense. So,
Okay, thanks for that. Next, Criminal Justice Committee update. Judge Maderi is the new chair, but can't be with us today. And Judge Spillane's going to report on that.
I'll give a report on that. We met on March 3rd remotely again, and we have 3 charges: monitor proceedings within the state judiciary, recommend any necessary reforms, Charge 2, continue to evaluate and monitor the pretrial bail system for improvement, recommend any changes, work with the Office of Court Administration to facilitate implementation of legislative reforms, and 3, monitor the judiciary's role and work with the Operation Lone Star. We heard on all 3 charges. The highlight includes an update. We heard an update from several researchers who are with the National Center for State Courts. And they worked also with the Office of Court Administration on actually studying the use of remote hearings in Texas state courts. They went to 8 different jurisdictions. I believe it was in the spring of 2021. I believe they said at that time about 85% of the courts hearings were remote at that time. And they found several things. They found that remote proceedings take, I think they said 34%, but anyway, they take longer than in-person hearings. They had several recommendations talking to a variety of judges, court personnel, and litigants and citizens. Courts need to provide clear instructions for remote proceedings. They need to set clear expectations for remote hearings with all participants on decorum, dress code, the timing. Courts should make sure all parties have access to the right technology and equipment to participate. Since this is a tool that is here to stay, and they mentioned as well, similar to what we heard at the public, at the Public Trust and Confidence Committee, that the most judges feel that remote hearings work best, not necessarily on the actual type, but just, when they're short and limited in scope. But they do seem to be here to stay. And they even mentioned courts should consider hiring, they called it a technical bailiff, a digital bailiff, to make the proceedings run more smoothly. One thing they noted, though, is that especially citizens and litigants mentioned that what they really like about it is that they're not taking time off from work, decreases the time they're in the court, they don't have to go and find parking. Also mentioned was the precision of timing. Evidently with Zoom hearings, we're much more precise of when your hearing's going to be. On the flip side of that, they noted and they warned that judges have to be better about taking breaks, that judges were reporting more burnout because they're just going Zoom hearing after Zoom hearing. And so, again, maybe the technical bailiff or other, expertise can help us in terms of scheduling. But there were a lot of pluses that were noted with that report. We received an update on the judiciary's involvement in Operation Lone Star. I know later on today, I think we're going to hear about that as well. The judiciary has visiting judges conducting magistration at the border, and OCA has a court consultant and OLS manager working with counties involved in Operation Lone Star. We heard an update on Senate Bill 6, and this was in March, so before the April date for the public safety report, but we heard about that and how that bill's going. And I know we're going to hear an update later today on bail reform as well. We heard from Angela Garcia, and we'll hear from her later too, but we heard from her as well.
Questions for Judge Spillane again? Yes.
Sonia Clayton, I'm in the
Yes.
And I would like, if there is some type of customer service or maybe a help desk support where individuals with an age gap can call. Most of the generations right now, or the biggest generation is obviously the boomers. Not all of them have access to computers, not all have access to cell phones. And so since everything is moving to higher technologies, how is that being addressed? And do we have any plans to provide some type of customer service for them?
So there, Ms. Clayton, there's not a statewide customer service. Obviously, we have staff here at OCA that has answered lots of questions on Zoom and technology needs. We also when we were doing virtual trials, they're not happening as frequently, but OCA did lend out to counties iPads for potential jurors if they didn't have access to technology. But that, I do believe that was one of the recommendations of the study, is to make sure that there are like a technical bailiff who can answer questions, technology questions for those individuals that have them. And so that's one of the recommendations that the council is going to be looking at.
And
Okay,
And I
thank you.
do know, and I guess this was pre-pandemic, talking to David, there was going to be some work in either this committee or a public trust committee as well, can look at just courts' websites in general, because citizens are using more and more, and judges, I think, are evolving on realizing that the websites represent the court, but they're actually very useful. And on the other end, I know that Sonia was talking about people who may have some trouble. On the other end, a lot of citizens want to use the technology in the court websites to interact with us.
I don't know if my question is for Judge Spillane or Judge Mescal, but did you consider developing best practices for judges and for attorneys to share with their clients for Zoom hearings? I continue to see some attorneys calling into hearings from their cars while traveling. And I continue to see some using their screensaver or name, and chief of one appellate court said that's like turning your back on the court.
Yes.
If you have a screen with just your name on it. And it seems to me that they don't do those things to be intentionally rude.
Mhm.
They just are insensitive to it. And I'm wondering if that's something we should do, either for committee or.
I think both. I know Kelly talked to us, Kelly Thibodeau, and I think she mentioned in February that they were still, in February of this year, there were 70,000 average hearings a month compared, there was over 100,000. So there's still a lot of hearings going on that are remotely. And I think that makes sense that was a recommendation from the National Center of State Courts that we developed something. And I don't know if they're out there. I think, Emily, you may know better than I, the ones that are out there. You may have one too.
The drawback so one of the recommendations from the study was judges should provide like a list of written procedures. The problem is with 3,200 judges, that's 3,200 sets of written procedures that realistically people are not going to read. And so what I have in thinking about that have come down on the other side, that it's much more like what was said over the phone. You do need a little bit more hands-on assisting. And so in my court, we don't have written procedures, but my coordinator has taken on the extra tasks of helping people get their cameras on, and then I, during the hearing, just like I would in the courtroom, communicate my expectations about your camera must be on, your decorum, all that. I think the solution to having 3,200 different sets of written procedures might be to have some statewide recommendations for best practices.
Right.
What we would also have to keep in mind, though, is rural courts, urban courts, very different. And so to the extent it's possible to, like having your camera on, I think could comfortably be a statewide recommendation. But other things might vary greatly based on the technology available in the courtroom. And so I think it is definitely a project worth working on, but I don't have it solved yet, if that answers your question.
It seems to me we should work on it, because there's some things that are so simple, such as don't call from a moving car, especially if you're driving.
Yeah.
But and it happens, and I just tell, ma'am, it looks like you're driving. We'll wait till you pull over,
On a practical side, my docket coordinator calls people before, a lot more calling. Now, on the other side, all the studies show, and this is probably why remote hearings will be around, is the appearance rates have gone up, and because people find it practical, but also, we're calling. So, but I guess we could give general guidelines like even that, to courts, because I'm sure courts now are developing guidelines as they're using remote that they didn't think about in the emergency as much.
And one of the things that has been talked about in the Rules Committee is if a court is setting a hearing either in person or remote, that court needs to publish in an easy to find place how to attend either in person or in remote. And so that parties, when they get notice of a hearing, can just that notice will contain all the information that they need to be able to participate. And having a consistent form for that might help courts provide the notice that they need to be providing. So you're right that we're sort of talking about this in our different silos, and it might be a good opportunity for our judicial council to bring all those silos together to have more coordination on those types of things.
I participated in a Zoom hearing last week, and the judge had 3 dockets going at the same time. The family, the civil and criminal at the same time. And she would call out a case number, and she didn't say page and number. She said case number, so you know how long that is. And then people would have to check their notes. Oh, was that me? And then some were there, some were not, some were on another Zoom in another court for another judge. And then the local judge told me, he said, the way that I handle it is we register, the attorneys register electronically, the way they register when they arrive in the courtroom. And so then they are called in the order in which they register. It seems to me that's a very simple best practice. And I said, and do you call out the cases by case number? He said, absolutely not, by page and by number. And so that's those little simple things that can make all the difference in the world. Because here's one judge who ran a smooth hearing for many, many attorneys, and then others just wasted so much time calling out names and not having people present. So there's simple things like that that we can do.
And that realistically, that's what I think is the best avenue for making progress, is educating judges on some of these best practices.
And I think in the smaller courts, what we've done is have great court coordinators. Judge Chu with Travis County JP Court sent out a beautiful thing on Android phone, and then an iPhone, and it became to be several pages. This is what I look like. This is what your screen is going to look like when you sign on. And we tried that through our court administrator, and ended up later, she would have to send a letter. If you have problems, we purchased kiosk computers to put in our law library in case you were uncomfortable with all of that. And it basically said call 30 minutes ahead or a day ahead of time, but we had to coordinate our own letter to say, if you can't see a video, you just see an audio, don't panic, call on the telephone at regular time. And so each court, I think, has individualized those things. I've personally had people call me from Walmart during their break, or attorneys on their phone. And you do have to use best practices and say, I'm going to put you in a breakout room until you get to a good place. And not waste everybody's time watching you drive down the road. And so I do think that the council needs to put some best practices, because individualism, I think, is going to come into play.
But I will say, I would like to commend our judges for doing a great job of providing support for people to appear via technology, because we don't provide any support for people to appear in person. If they lack transportation, they just can't get to court, and we just go on without them. And so during the pandemic, I think our Texas judges have done a great job of saying, excluding people is not a shared value. And so I think everyone's knocked themselves out to avoid excluding people. And I think we could bring that same attitude to all the people that were excluded by our traditional in-person system.
And I have had some very positive, and it's not just, I had a 92-year-old landlord in a Zoom with her face like so close. And she said, if it hadn't been for the pandemic, I wouldn't have gotten to experience this. But her granddaughter was technology-wise, but she enjoyed it. I've had other people say, I don't have to leave work, and I appreciate this. So I do think judges have been very versatile as far as we have more appearance, the percentage of appearances. And I think it's funny if the OCA could ever look at some of those Zoom hearings, because there are things that say, at times I'm like, go take your hat off, or various things, and they're interesting. And I think we've progressed as judges with making it easier for Zoom attendees, litigants.
Also, what I've observed now is, so in Collin County, we've been back to normal since August. And so most judges are setting all of the hearings and contested trials in person. I am, but inevitably every single day there's a litigant who is in another state or another country that needs to appear remotely, a doctor that needs to appear remotely for some brief testimony so they don't have to cancel all their patients, a city custodian of records who would like to appear remotely so they don't have to lose their whole morning to just authenticate a couple of pages of records. And so every day I'm all ready for an in-person day, and every day I've got like 4 people on Zoom for one reason or another. And I think realistically, that's going to be how it sticks around for us.
Where it increases access, and hopefully we'll be able to have that tool.
One other thing I wish the committee would look at, Judge, is the House JCJ committee asked me to come over and testify mainly a couple of weeks ago, and it was the day after the leak at the U.S. Supreme Court. And so I testified for 30 minutes, and the first question by Chairman Leach, who's a member of the council, was how are you going to keep that from happening on your court? And so one way is we do the same thing that SCOTUS does. We wag our fingers at the people and tell them you better not do this. But he asked me, and several, I think maybe Reggie asked me, Reggie Smith, who's also a member, asked me if it was criminal, because there'd been some question in the national news about whether it was a federal crime. And we think it is a state crime, and we've always thought so. And it's section 39.06 of the penal code. But he asked me specifically, Chairman Lynch did, if we should clarify that, if we should strengthen that, do something to call it people's attention or whatever. And so I feel like he would want me to ask you to take a look at that.
Definitely do that.
Chief, I just want to add that Judge Maderi is the chair of the Criminal Justice Committee, and she couldn't be here today because her daughter is graduating, and so she wanted to be here. And this is the only date that she told me that she couldn't be here, and that this is the date that worked best for the council. So we look forward to seeing her at the next meeting, but she is on the phone.
Well, that's great. Next is the data committee update. And Judge Gravel has had a sudden death in his immediate family. So Megan's going to give his.
Yes, so the data committee met on April 25th. The committee has two charges. The first is to monitor the implementation of the statewide uniform case management system. And then the second charge was continue to work on guiding the revisions of the core activity reporting database to collect case level statistical data. So much like all the other committees, this was a organizational meeting, just hearing a lot of information. So the committee did get an update and background on the National Open Court Data Standards, or NODS, from the National Center for State Courts. The update included data governance principles and emphasized understanding and balancing the interests of parties who seek the data. OCA does have a project team that is working on collecting case level data. They have gone through almost all of the NODS data standards to see what we can collect. So we're pushing that project forward. There was also an update at that meeting. That last session, there was about 3 bills that were filed to collect case level data. You know, the Judicial Council did recommend that in 2018. It is a process. Part of that process is every county having a robust case management system. We also got an update on how the uniform case management system that OCA is charged with implementing, how that is going. The project is focused on providing case management to counties less than 20,000 in population, which is more than half of the counties in Texas. We have about 40 counties that have expressed interest in being on that system, and we expect to have the first 2 counties on later this fall. The first 2 counties are Brewster and Crane. So we'll be monitoring that, but that's a really big piece in making sure, especially those smaller counties that don't have an adequate case management system, that they have one that can report that case level data to our office. Some of the next steps that the committee talked about was, especially during this time when we're closely looking at the backlog, is making sure that judges and clerks are accurately reporting data to our office. And so the committee talked about sending a letter to clerks and judges, reminding them of that importance.
Thank you. Any questions for me? Next is the Indigent Defense Commission, Jeff Burkhardt. Jeff?
Thank you, Jim.
Yeah.
I apologize for my tardiness today. I was asked to present to public defenders in Brazil this morning. And I gave that presentation when I talked to my wife and told her I was presenting to Brazilian public defenders. She said, a Brazilian public defenders, that sounds like a lot. Ended up just being a few dozen. I just want to give you 3 updates real quick on TIDC. One, we're in our grant cycle right now. And for the first time, we have about double the amount in requests as we have funding available for building new public defender offices. Some of you know we've been adding about 10 counties a year to public defender offices across Texas. It's been a great model for rural counties, but we'll probably be pushing for some additional funding next legislative session to be able to continue that. So great that we have such demand, but the supply of funds for that is starting to dwindle. So we've got a challenge there. Second thing to provide you an update on is that we're still engaged in Operation Lone Star. We have 2 public defender offices and about 20 private assigned counsel engaged in the provision of services for Operation Lone Star. It has been a struggle to get enough attorneys involved in this as we need. So we're continuing to push for that and trying to recruit attorneys to provide counsel in these cases. So I'm happy to answer any questions you have about that. And then finally, 2 sessions ago, SB 560 directed the Texas Judicial Council and the Office of Court Administration to start collecting data on child protective services cases. And I believe Judge Miskell already spoke a little bit about that today. I just wanted to give you a quick introduction to Crystal F. Pignon. So excited to hire Crystal on our staff. She's helping with that data collection for the Texas Judicial Council and OCA. Essentially what we've done is piggyback that data collection on TIDC's data collection system, which has been around about 2 decades. So it's worked out quite well. And thanks to Crystal, the compliance from counties has been much higher than we thought. So we're getting about that. And I think that's it, unless you all have any questions for me.
Any questions?
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. Next is the update on order magistration and Operation Lone Star.
Yes, so just a brief update. So when the full council last met in August of last year, the judiciary had just started getting involved in Operation Lone Star. The chief appointed at that time, more than 30 visiting judges to assist in conducting magistration at the border. At that time, there was only one temporary processing facility in Valverde County. There has since been a second processing facility opened up in Jim Hogg County. To date, our judges have magistrated more than 4,500 individuals. We currently have about 28 judges still on our list, and they conduct magistration remotely via video magistrate. Magistration is conducted at 9 and 6:30 on weekdays, and then 9 o'clock and 4 p.m. on weekends. We have 7 interpreters that are also staffed by OCA who are doing all the interpretation during these magistration hearings. And we also have 4 full-time and 3 part-time administrative assistants who are acting as the court coordinators for the judges and making sure all the documentation is signed and the paperwork is getting to the right parties. You've probably seen in the news that there's a lot of reporting on the adjudication of these cases. We hired in December a former court coordinator. She actually used to work for us and retired, Aurora Zamora, to assist on the ground in helping these counties that are involved in Operation Lone Star, implementing best practices and docket management. And so we've seen a lot of progress since then and getting these cases processed. There was a backlog. There still is a backlog. Kinney County, over the past 5 years, I think they have less than 150 misdemeanors, and now they have more than 3,500 to process. So it is a big undertaking. We also hired an OLS manager, Louis Tomasetti, who's sitting over here. He staffs us at the Emergency Operations Center. Several state agencies are there every day, and Louis is there too. So just working hard. It takes up a lot of our time, but we're doing the best that we can. I'm happy to answer any questions.
The project came up in August of last year, I think.
July.
And so David began working on it, and our goal in the project, of course, is just to make sure that the judiciary functions the way it's supposed to in these cases, and that everybody is treated just as they would anywhere else in a criminal case in Texas. And so we have nothing to do with the operation itself, or we certainly don't advise the governor on what to do or when to do it. Ours is just handling the judiciary side of it, and that's it. And they know that, and they're very mindful of that. distinction. So we haven't had any issues with DPS or the governor's office, or anybody working with the program. And we have had issues from time to time about our side of it, the magistration and the proceedings, but we've tried to work through those, and we're still trying. And I should have said earlier that after David left, Menno Ramon, our longtime general counsel at OCA, so I've been there a little over 25 years. Started at 12, and she filled in for us for several weeks, and just like we dumped the bail on Megan, we dumped it on Menno a little bit too. But we dumped Operation Lone Star on her for several weeks, and she did a great job.
I'm sure she was grateful.
Yeah. Okay, that brings us to a 2021 annual statistical report update from our genius on these things, Angela. Angela.
Committee, you've seen the overall trends presentation before, but Megan asked me to refresh all the backlog information. So that is all fresh as of March 31st. And our eviction and debt case data is as of yesterday.
Hopefully we won't have too much noise from TFC. We told them we were having a meeting here. They're doing lots of work in this building, and so apologize for that.
Oh, yeah, right. I think you have the latest version in your packets. So in terms of the change in cases added from fiscal year 20 to 21, filings declined at all court levels, except in constitutional county courts, which have a very small portion of the caseload. And the greatest percentage of decline occurred in the courts of appeals. 18% drop because the criminal cases weren't going up to the courts of appeals, and there were a few civil cases going up as well. Next slide. The number of civil case filings continue to decline at every trial court level except for the district courts. So they're actually increasing. And justice courts declined by 5%, municipal court by 5%, county courts by 15%, and that is due to the continued decline in debt cases. Slide. Compared to 2020, when filings in all civil cases declined from the previous year, increases occurred in a few categories, including motor vehicle accidents, which are our biggest civil case category, tax, and justice court debt cases. Slide. After reaching an all-time high in 2019, new eviction cases filed in justice courts fell 28% in 2020 and 31% in 2021. The number of cases filed in 2021 was the lowest since 2000. Prior to the pandemic, eviction cases accounted for more than 40% of the justice court civil caseload, but during the pandemic in 2021 accounted for only 25%. Slide. This is data as of yesterday. Filings have been increasing since June, as you can see by the redder shades. In the first 8 months of this fiscal year, filings are up by almost 60,000 compared to this same time last year. We have already exceeded the number filed last year at evictions. January through March have seen the highest numbers filed since the pandemic, but April may not be quite complete yet because reports roll in a little bit late. So I expect to see continued increases in eviction filings. Slide. Debt cases continue to decline in the district and county courts, but grew to an all-time high in justice courts. They were up another 12%. The percentage of debt cases as part of the overall civil caseload shrunk slightly in the district and county courts, but soared to almost 2/3 of the justice court's civil caseload since evictions had declined. So we've got all-time debt cases and growing eviction cases. Debt cases in justice courts as of yesterday. The debt filings during the pandemic have remained relatively high compared to the period previous 5 years ago. So you'll see, where was that? The slide before or slide, I'm sorry. Slide. One more, there you go. You see this red period where filings in the justice courts exploded. So we were reaching all-time highs every year. Even during the pandemic, filings have not really declined. So from 2019 to 2020, there were only 12,000 fewer cases filed that year. And then 2021, all-time high. So we're going to probably reach, well, 2022 is running 72,000 lower, which really surprises me. I'm wondering if there's a delay in reporting again, but given all this red here, I would expect debt cases to continue to increase at a large rate, especially with the economy and the eviction protections running out and the federal funds as people have fewer resources to pay their bills.
Does that have to do timeline wise with the increase in jurisdictional limits, or did it start before the increase?
It tends to, yes. So I think that jurisdictional limits is one thing, and then the change in the justice court rules is probably another factor. I think we've seen a lot of mass filings from debt collection companies is what's doing it. It's very easy to file a huge number of cases, very easily. Next slide. During the pandemic, one of the only case categories that increased were estate cases. And I guess you can imagine why. Been a lot of deaths, and actually rose 20% during or just over last year. And involuntary mental health commitments also increased during the pandemic. They have not gone down. Slide. New family cases increased, while post-judgment suits for modification or enforcement continue to decline. We've got more divorce filings coming, and parent-child no divorce cases that are driving that trend. Slide. Filings increased or decreased in half of the case categories, but the most significant declines occurred in child support, modification, or enforcement cases. So for some reason, people aren't filing modifications or enforcements at the rate that they used to.
Well, and if those are 40, those are the ones filed by the Attorney General.
Right, right. And slide. New divorce cases and new parent-child cases not involving a divorce increased from the previous year. New child protection cases fell for the third year in a row to the lowest level since 2014. And part of that reason is change in federal law, where they're making it, you take every opportunity to keep the family together and keep these cases out of court. So nationwide, we've seen that trend in the decline of child protection cases. And then you have to figure also that with the pandemic and the kids at home, there may not be opportunities for people to lay eyes or on what may be going on. Slide. Slide. Since the peak in 2007, the number of juvenile cases has fallen 74% to the lowest level since 1993. For the second consecutive year, new delinquent conduct cases mostly involved a felony offense rather than misdemeanor. So the juvenile cases being filed are fewer and they're more serious because they're not pursuing the misdemeanor cases or they're diverting them out of the system. Slide. As you can see by the change in case categories, filings declined in all case categories except for homicides in 2021. The largest declines were in assault and burglary cases, but during the pandemic, the only cases that were increasing were assault, murder, aggravated assault, homicides, capital murder. So again, caseload's reducing, but now it's the more serious stuff that you can't move through quickly. On the Class C side, the fight only slide. Filings declined in all case categories except for tobacco and e-cigarette, traffic, DUI, and education code cases. And the most significant declines were truancy and local daytime ordinance cases. But 55% of juvenile cases were traffic in 2021, as they usually are. It's majority traffic, because the council has worked very hard to eliminate or divert charges from kids to keep them from getting a criminal history. Because you can go to juvenile court and get your record sealed, but if you get a traffic ticket or a Class C, you have a criminal record. Slide. The number of new misdemeanor cases has been falling since 2007, but took a steep dive in 2020 and 2021 due to the pandemic, and a significant decline in drug cases being prosecuted, primarily marijuana. It's down almost 50% from the peak, and the 2021 filing rate was the lowest since at least 1985. On the felony side, however, we've been reaching all-time highs. We've increased each year since 2014, reached an all-time high in 2019, declined in 2020 due to the pandemic, but are now rebounding to reach all-time highs again. So again, fewer cases criminally, but more complex and more serious in the justice system. Slide. Over the last 5 years, the only misdemeanor case category types that have increased are assault and first offense DWI. Even here, again, more of the serious misdemeanors, fewer of the less serious. Slide. The steepest declines in felony cases occurred in drug cases and cases involving indecency or sexual assault of a child. Aside from capital murder, aggravated assault, attempted murder, family violence, assault, and auto theft were the only categories that increased during the pandemic. Again, same trend, the most serious stuff. Slide. New misdemeanor drug offense cases fell by almost half in 2020 due to the pandemic and not prosecuting marijuana cases, as well as an overall steep decrease just due to the pandemic that we've seen misdemeanor wide. After reaching a peak in 2019, felony drug cases also declined, but at a much slower rate, and exceeded the number of misdemeanor drug cases filed for the first time since 1994. Unlike misdemeanor offenses, felony drug offenses increased in 2021. Slide. Traffic and parking cases have been declining for 13 years. The number of cases filed in 2020 was 60% lower than the peak in 2020 or 2006, and was the lowest number filed since 1980. The number of non-traffic fine-only misdemeanors was 64% lower than the peak in 2008, and was the second lowest number filed since 1979. Slide and slide. At the appellate court level, in the courts of appeals, the number of criminal cases declined steeply due to the pandemic. In 2021, criminal case filings were the lowest since 1988. And after the highest civil filing rate in history in 2019, the number of civil cases has declined during the pandemic for obvious reasons. Slide. In the courts of criminal appeals, applications for writs of habeas corpus declined to the lowest level since at least 2001. And after declining the previous year to the lowest level since 1989, petitions for discretionary review increased slightly. Original proceedings declined to the lowest level since 1999. At the Supreme Court level, petitions for review, which account for the majority of the court's caseload, declined for the second year in a row, though at a slower rate than in 2020. And the number of regular causes added to the docket declined as well, while the number of other petitions and writs increased by 14%. That's the end of the 2021 trends. Does anybody have any questions? Any observations? All right, slide. We'll get to the latest backlog numbers. Slide. This shows the rate of clearance rates during the pandemic. So March 31st or March 1st of 2020 through March 31st of 2022. Although the clearance rates were below 100% in every category except for fine-only misdemeanors, they have been generally improving. Felony cases continue to have the lowest clearance rate at the left, but misdemeanor cases have moved from the second lowest to the fourth. Slide. This slide shows the number of cases pending in the district courts as of March 31st, each year since 2011. The markers on the trend line indicate the level of cases pending as of March 2020, when the pandemic hit. Prior to the pandemic, the number of cases pending in the district courts had been increasing slightly for a couple of years due to record numbers of filings. Since 2020, the pending caseload has grown by 37%, which equates to almost 74,000 cases. But if you could see from 20 to 22, the growth rate declined to almost zero. It was only 2% the last year. So courts are catching up, or at least maintained where they were during 21. On the misdemeanor side, the number of cases pending in the county courts had been decreasing due to significant decrease in misdemeanor filings. Since 2020, the number of active cases has grown by 12%, which equates to more than 40,000 cases. But actually from 21 to 22, the number of pending cases declined by 7%. So the county courts are eating into the misdemeanor backlog. Slide. It shows the largest increase in volume of active criminal cases since the pandemic. At the district level, the top 5 counties were the same as in December, as the last information you saw, but the order has changed, and they were accounting for a slightly higher percentage of the total criminal backlog statewide. They were 44%, now they're 48%. At the county level, Bear dropped out of the top 5 and Bell joined. The number of cases declined significantly from December, and the top 5 counties accounted for just over half of the total statewide criminal backlog. Slide. This shows the largest backlogs by volume of case category. On the felony side, aggravated assault and attempted murder has moved up to the top after other felonies. All the other categories were the same. And on the misdemeanor side, theft fell off. DWI offense dropped from second to fourth, and second DWI offense made the list. So there's been some shifting. And all other case categories, pending cases were lower than before the pandemic. So again, the most serious cases that are pending here with the biggest volumes. Slide. Over the last 2 years, the district civil pending caseload grew by 7%, or almost 28,000 cases, but had leveled off from 21 to 22. So we're stabilized. While there was a large decrease in filings during the pandemic, dispositions exceeded filings in the county courts. So it led to a decline of 3% in the pending caseload in county courts in civil cases. So they're eating into pre-pandemic backlogs. Slide. This shows the largest volume in civil case backlogs. At the district level, the top 5 counties remained the same, but switched in order. And the backlog fell by 10,000 cases in this group and accounted for less than half of total civil backlog. At the county level, the top 5 counties were the same. Dallas remained at the top. Nueces fell from second to fifth, and 3 new counties populated the middle. So we're seeing a lot of movement in the county courts. But the numbers are much smaller. Slide. In civil cases, other civil moved to the top, tax cases fell off, and real property not involving eminent domain made the list. Slide. During the pandemic, the number of district family pending cases increased by 13% or 45,000 cases. But from 20 to 21, pending cases stabilized due to a slight decline in filings, but an increase in dispositions. In the county courts, family cases grew by 8% or almost 4,000 cases. And it's relatively level though, with small numbers. Slide. At the district level, Tarrant County fell out of the top 5. Fort Bend joined and all the others shifted order. At the county level, the top 5 counties remain the same and in the same order. Slide. So by volume of increase in active pending cases, divorce, with children, without children, any shared child matters where a child is not involved, and child support cases were had the greatest volume of backlog in terms of case categories. Slide. During the pandemic, filings plummeted, but clearance rates were great, leading to a 7% decline in cases pending in the district courts and 26% in the juvenile courts. Slide. The top 5 counties by volume, very, very small numbers. McLennan and Fannin fell off while Dallas and Tarrant joined top 5 on district. And on the county side, Cleveland fell off and Valverde moved up. And last slide. Juvenile cases in decency and sexual assault of a child fell off. The top 5 in terms of backlog volume, and felony drug cases were added. But you can see here again, very small numbers, but assault, attempted murder, capital murder, murder, aggravated robbery is where the backlogs are. And that was my last slide. Does anybody have any questions?
Questions? Have you noticed any trends that you think are significant in the last 3 or 4 months?
I've noticed a lot on the county side, the shifting. So counties are working. They're also looking at their data to make sure it's more correct, because that's an issue. Kudos to El Paso. 5 or 6 years ago, they had us come out, look at their data. Is it correct? They cleaned it all up. And I think we're finding that problem in Dallas, where the data isn't that clean and nobody can really point to the correct number, right? So it's counties are paying more attention to their data, and we're emphasizing that we need this information now. We can't wait 6 months because we want to see what's happening. Everybody wants to see what's happening. We want progress. And it's really important to mark your progress and understand where you are and where you need to go.
And are there significant delays in reporting?
The big counties are great. Our smaller counties have gotten away with not reporting for 6 months, a year. We try to keep up on them, but there's only so much we can do. We work through indigent defense on a yearly basis to compel them to get yearly reports. And Judge Keller has gotten with us to look at who has not been reporting. And I understand Megan and Judge Keller and TIC had conversations about how we can improve that on a more regular basis.
So what in the TIDC grants, if the county is not reporting their data to OCA, TIDC can hold their grants until they comply. And so that's something that we've been looking at, is the list. And that's only for district and county, not for JP and municipal. But obviously we don't have a significant backlog in those areas. So it's something that we're watching.
Is that something you should explore?
I think so. And I, because TIDC is in their current grant process right now, it wouldn't be something that we could probably implement if there was any changes until the next grant cycle, which would start next year. But I think we could put the jurisdictions on notice. That's something that we're looking at. And something that the data committee had recommended is sending a letter from the Judicial Council to clerks, to judges, saying how important this data is, that not only is the Judicial Council looking at making decisions based on it, but the legislature is as well. And so it needs to be accurate and needs to be reported timely. And just reminding, I mean, obviously everyone during the pandemic practices got lax because they were focusing on other areas. So just putting out that gentle reminder to them from the council would be a good idea.
Yes, Senator.
We need to know how effective that deterrent is too. The possibility of revoking grants. That's very difficult legislation to pass, and so we need to go back and see if it's working and if we should use it.
I think TIEC, and just behind us, TIEC does withhold grants every grant cycle, from what I understand, and they get into compliance quickly because it's something that they rely on. Jeff, if you have anything else to add on that.
No, that's correct. I mean, so what we do is this is our formula grant program. This formula grants for all 254 counties. And if a county fails to report to OCA, essentially what we do, we calculate their formula grant award. But we place on that award a special condition that until they finish their reporting, they don't receive the funds. And generally that's been pretty successful in our end, as you said, for districts. Yeah.
We've gotten a few requests, evidently that's been conveyed, so we're getting auditors really freaking out, like I need to see if my clerk's information is in, and so we're seeing a really good outcome from that.
Yes, I think it definitely is working. I will point out it's for fiscal years 20 and 21 that they have to be in compliance for the funds to be released. At least that's our understanding right now, but it's also helping us. It gives us another opportunity to say, and you're missing this for fiscal year 22. But for fiscal year 22 reporting, funds are not being held right now.
And Senator, to your question about the requirement, I think that's, we'll double check on this, but I think that might not require any kind of legislative change. We might be able to do that requirement administratively, but we'll confirm that.
Thank you.
But so you were saying the penalty only kicks in when they're a year behind, basically.
Correct. So right now we're following up on fiscal year 2021. We still follow up on the current fiscal year routinely, but for the funding purposes, it's 20 and 21 right now.
So if a county reported every single bit of data 12 months late, they would never risk losing grant funding?
Correct.
How often are they reporting? How often are they supposed to be reporting?
Monthly, by law.
So their reports are due on the 20th. So we're in May. So they're today. The April monthly reports are due today from the counties.
And that standard is in the grant rules. So just like governor's office that has 90% disposition rate for their criminal history stuff, that's all in the grant rules, released by TIC.
Well, always an eye-opening report.
Yeah.
Yes, Judge.
Just make one comment to Angela. Thanks for such an in-depth report. I've sent that link to a lot of courts and a lot of other people, because there's a lot of, non-intuitive things that are going on, at least on the criminal side. So thanks. That's so transparent in there. Yeah, it's really interesting.
Decided a long time ago, I was never going to ask Angela to analyze my personal finances.
Who brought that up? Michael brought that up. He's like, I need to tell my financial analyst person that this is what they should do.
A lagging indicator there. Financial markets, you guys keep track of.
Okay, next is the court backlog funding update.
Yeah, so you saw the data. So what are we doing about it? We during the third special session last fall, the judiciary was appropriated $7 million to help with the backlog to use for visiting judges and court staff. The money was actually just transferred 2 weeks ago. So we, a few weeks ago, sent out, we've been working with the regional presiding judges. We sent out a letter to the top 20 counties at the district level that have the biggest backlog in the state, because 70% of the district backlog is in those 20 counties. Asking them to send, we had a form and asking them to send their backlog plan and any funding resources needed. Those plans are due today. We've received several so far, so we expect them to be trickling in throughout the rest of the day. We're going to work with the chief and Judge Keller and the regional presiding judges to review those, I believe, not next week, the following week, and try to get the money quickly out the door. The ones that I've looked at so far, there are requests for court clerks, for one jurisdiction wants to set up a new auxiliary court, and so staff to fund that court. So different ideas from each jurisdiction. So we're going to review those. Obviously, $7 million doesn't go very far. So we're hoping once we can compile all those requests and get that dollar figure that we can then go talk to the legislature, talk to the governor's office to see if there's any other pots of money that we might be able to access to help with that. So that's kind of where we're at now. We're hoping to get that money out the door quickly so jurisdictions can start using it.
We're going to be going through those plans and really making a push before the session to show that we're doing our best to get this done. I just got a text from Chairman Leach, who's joined us on the phone. So welcome, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks. It's great to be with you, Chief Justice. Sorry I'm not there first.
Yep. And the last regular item on the agenda is an update on bail reform and Senate Bill 6. Megan and team.
Yes, so I'm going to introduce Alejandra Pena and Nita Gill. Alejandra is our Deputy Director for Research and Court Services, and part of during the implementation process of this, we held dozens of calls and training sessions to get counties prepared for this, and Nita led all of those calls. She's going to give a brief update on Senate Bill 6, and then Nita Gill, who's our project manager for bail, she's actually going to do a demo of the system. I want to thank, like the chief said, bail was very stressful on a very short timeline. We had less than 6 months to implement a huge statewide technology project, and our team did a great job, worked very long hours to meet that April 1st deadline.
Good morning. I'll give you all a quick overview of what the system looks like and how it's being used at the local level, and then Nita's going to give a demo of the system as well. Do you want me to take a slide? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
We can go on to the next slide.
Slide.
Oh, Michael has it. Oh, okay. So as you all know, Senate bill was enacted last year during the second called session of the 87th legislature, and it is related to the procedures for setting the amount of bail, release of certain defendants on monetary or personal bonds, duties of certain officers taking bail bonds, duties of magistrates, and reporting information pertaining to bail bonds. And this is a really big part of what the PSRS does. It additionally required the system, a standardized public safety report system for statewide use, and it successfully went live April 1st. Like Megan mentioned, after a few months of a lot of hard work. So we're all really happy it was up and running on the 1st. The main two things that this system does is produce a public safety report, which is a summary of criminal history information that magistrates now need to consider. And additionally, it produces the bail form, which is the main source of the data collection for some of the data elements that the bill requires now. So again, magistrates now need to consider a PSR for defendants charged in a Class B misdemeanor offense or higher. It cannot be the only item that they consider, but they do need to consider it now. Slide. Slide, please. And so to give you all a quick overview of how the system is working. An individual is arrested and this person is processed. The defendant's information has to be entered into the public safety report system, and this has to be done by a user that has access to query for criminal history information. The reason is because our system now connects through TLIT's connection for DPS's criminal history database. And our system has to be able to retrieve the full criminal history to produce a public safety report. So then the public safety report is produced and it is presented to the magistrates. We have our Article 1517 hearing take place, bail decisions are made, and then those decisions have to be entered into the public safety report. So that's like that second phase of the data entry process in the system. Once the information is entered, so the bail amount, the type, and the conditions, the information has to be certified by the judge or by someone that the judge has chosen on their behalf. Once the information is certified, the bail form is produced and OCA goes and takes that information overnight to make it publicly available by the next day, which is also a requirement of the bill.
And I want to add to it that all of this is prescribed in Senate Bill 6, and we are limited to what is in Senate Bill 6. There's an actual provision in there that says that the system cannot contain anything else than what is described in this section. A lot of counties have asked us to, can we add this? Can we change this? And we cannot because this is what's prescribed by the legislation.
Yeah. And I'll point out from the information that is published on the form, you have the defendant's name, date of birth, basic identifying information, the county of arrest, the magistration location, and an indication if conditions were given or not. We are not posting the full list of conditions to protect any confidential information that might be in them, but there is a yes or no indication for the forms that are posted on the website. Slide. Thank you. So we're using the system in two different ways. One for magistrations that happen immediately after the initial arrest. And then the second one is if there are changes to the bail type or the amount, a modified bail form has to be submitted. So this is already taking place when a case has been filed at the county or at the district court. Criminal history information and updated record has to be presented for judges to consider. Depending on the situation, they may not need to consider a public safety report, but criminal history, they do. Once the decision on the change in the bail type or amount is made, that is what has to be entered into the Psrs to produce that modified bail form. And then same routine, OCA will go and take this information overnight to make it publicly available the next day. Slide. Thank you. So because the system has now opened the door to provide access for criminal history information at a larger scale than how it was being provided before, we like to remind our judges and court staff of certain requirements from DPS when you're managing criminal history information. So individuals who are only viewing either hard or electronic copies of criminal history must have a criminal justice practitioner certification in place. It's about a 2-hour self-paced course online. They can take it whenever they want to. It's on their own time. And they do need to recertify every couple of years. They also need to complete a CJIS security awareness training, also online on their own time. And this one is about 1 hour. Slide. And for those who need to query for criminal history themselves, and so some examples that we're seeing right now is if law enforcement is not able to assist at the local level to take care of that first part of the data entry to produce the public safety report, some of our judges are going through a more extensive certification, which is the TLIT's mobile access certification, an 8-hour scheduled course by DPS. And this is so that they can have the appropriate permissions to query for criminal history themselves. Slide. And so part of the other bill requirements was judicial education. So now only judges who are in compliance with judicial education requirements of the bill are those who are able to set bail for defendants in cases with Class B misdemeanor offenses or higher. The bill required OCA to develop and approve these trainings, and we worked with our training centers to put these together. It's an 8-hour initial training course and then 2 hours of continuing education. Slide. And so all justices of the peace have to take it regardless of if they are magistrating or not. And judges in office as of April 1st have until December 1st to complete those initial 8 hours of training that the bill requires. Slide.
And I will add to just on the training piece that we've heard from a lot of judges, because there's a lot of training. So they have to get the 8 hours of judicial education and then at a minimum 4 additional hours of training from DPS. And using, so that's 12 hours, and some are getting the full 8 hours of training from DPS because some judges are actually having to query the system. So that's 16 hours of training just this year on bail.
And so some of the reporting requirements, the bill called for 4 additional data elements that have to be collected by OCA. The first part is threefold, and so it's the number of defendants for whom bail was set in criminal cases for, the category of offense, number of personal bonds, number of surety or cash bonds. This is information that our district and county clerks likely won't have because these situations are happening before a case is filed. But we were able to work with our vendor to go ahead and pull this data directly from the Psrs. So OCA is pulling this information within the first 7 days of the month and posting these on our website. We have our April statistics posted on the website already. Slide. The other 3 data elements are being collected in the Judicial Counseling Monthly Court Activity Reports. So that information for April is going to be posted sometime next week, since today is the day due for reporting of the previous month. And that is the number of cases in which defendants released on bail subsequently failed to appear, number of cases in which defendants released on bail subsequently violated a condition of their release, and the number of cases where defendants committed an offense while released on bail or community supervision. Our reporting team worked really hard to put together a guide document, since, as you can tell, one of these instances could trigger all 3 of them. So we have very detailed guidelines posted on our website that indicate what type of situation should be reported for each field to try and have more uniform data and avoid duplicity of some of the counts. And again, that information will be posted next week. Slide. Additional reporting requirements that came from the bill. So sheriffs will receive reports from charitable bail organizations for individuals that they have posted bond for in a previous month. The sheriff now has to collect that report and also send a copy of it to OCA. We are receiving these through our bail inbox, and that will be part of what's included in an annual report in December. Slide. All right, and so here are some of the PSRS April statistics. During the month of April, we had just a little over 36,000 bail forms that were completed in the public safety report system. Of those 36,000 plus, 52% were completed by the following counties, which we have some of the larger counties here. It's not surprising they had the most bail forms. Slide. And so when looking at the bail forms that were completed by the location type, 24% were completed by magistrate courts and 23% by justice of the peace. So just about 50% of all of the bail forms that were completed came from a magistrate court or a justice of the peace. Slide. And when looking at it by the offense level and the bail type, Class A misdemeanors was the most reported offense level, and we have the visual here in order of offenses. And the most bail types that were granted, coming at 82%, was cash insured. And next slide. That's where I'll wrap up the statistics, and now we'll get into some of the system details and the demo. I'll let Nitu take over. Before we do that, are there any questions?
The only thing I would add to, so that you can see the number of personal bonds granted, is low. And the bill also eliminated, a huge, category of offenses, that are no longer eligible for personal bond as well. Mostly those were, violent and high-level offenses. So less personal bonds are being given out.
Thanks, Alondra. Slide, please. Good morning, everybody. So I'll just give a brief overview of the system, just recapping what Alondra said, and then I'll provide a demo to show how quickly the PS report can be created and the bill form. So just to recap, as Alondra said, that this system is statewide, is used for state government. The system is used to capture bill-related data information. It provides a summary report for the magistrate judge regarding criminal history. Our vendor was Audemont. They're based out of Arizona. They have been a great vendor to work with. They've been there with us every step of the way. Currently, we are working on system enhancements. We have been receiving feedback from the courts, law enforcement, and other users to compile a list of future enhancements that would make the system run more efficiently and be more productive for the people. Training wise, we hosted Audemont, our vendor, hosted several live trainings in March and April, and we do have these recorded sessions on our website. If there are new users or if a user needs to recap information, they can go to our website and view the trainings. Slide, sorry. The PSR system has two types of users. So the first user being local to administrative user, they are more of the higher level user. So there can be more than one user per location. There can be an LAU for multiple locations. The main purpose of the LAU is that they can add additional users, they can add additional administrative rights, and they can add new conditions and update locations in the system. The end users are going to be mainly the people who are going to be adding the defendant information into the system. And so these are going to be your forefront people. They will be able to add the defendant information in the system, like I said. They can assign multiple roles, and they can also certify a bill form on behalf of the judge. So with that, we'll jump into the demo. Let me just get that set up real quick. Sorry.
And I will add that every county is doing it differently. So some counties have jail staff that is running the system and inputting the data. Some counties, it's the actual magistrate that's doing it. I believe we have a DA's office that's assisting with this. So every county is doing it differently. We have obviously 254 counties. And so that was probably one of the biggest hurdles at the beginning was, how do we do this? That was the number one question that we got. And so we worked with each jurisdiction that reached out to help them identify what would be the best process for them based on their existing processes.
Okay, thank you, Megan. So to start, can you make it full screen? Okay, thank you. So this is our website. It's the bill at tscourts.gov. The first page that pops up is your log information. So I'll go ahead and log in. Once you log in, we have this notification, basically just outlining that you agreed to some of the rules, regulations. So you just click I accept. This is the home page once you log in. So as you can see, there's a column that says new to add arrest, and then there's a magistration column that's all completed magistrations. This is where the end user will log in and create to add in the defend information and add an arrest. So we'll start with adding arrest. Right here is where you can either find the defendant in the system if they're already in there, or you can add a new defendant. So we'll just make up a new defendant. So click on add defendant, and they'll go in and enter in all of the information in here. It's not that much. All the information with asterisks, that is required information. So I'll just populate this real quickly. If you do have the SID number, you can enter it on this page right here. If not, you can also go back into the system and input that. It is important to have that to retrieve the criminal history. So I'll go to put that in there and you press next. Thereafter, you'll add the arrest information right here. You can add if you have the case number, you can input that. Like I said, everything with an asterisk, that is required information. So I'll go to put the arrest date in there and put an arrest time in there. Oops. And
And then we'll put one for county of arrest. Anderson County. And right here is where we add the offense. So I'm gonna demo inputting a misdemeanor as well as a felony because there's a feature later on that I would like to show you how to split the two. So we're going to add a count in here. So we'll just do one. I'll do then. So we'll put in a felony right there, and then we'll add that. And then I'll go ahead and add a misdemeanor as well. Right here, after you add the offenses, you'll click Save and Retrieve Criminal History. And since we had already put the SID number in, that'll automatically retrieve their criminal history. As Alejandra had mentioned, the user must have the 8-hour training to have this option available to them. If they do not have the 8-hour training, it's not in their user profile, they will be unable to retrieve the criminal history. So I'll click Save and Retrieve. From there, it'll populate this page right here. So we have on the left-hand side, you have the arrest details, and then you have a tab for magistration. At the top where it says the defendant's name, you can edit that if there are any corrections that need to be made. As mentioned previously, so right here we have a split, we can split the cases. So if two of the different offenses have different bond amounts or different conditions, that's where you'll be able to split the two and create two separate bill forms. So I will go ahead and create this. I'll split it. Once you split it, I'll just confirm if you do for sure want to split it. So let's split that. Okay, so right here, it's split the two. So you have the felony at the top and the misdemeanor at the bottom. To review the PSR report, you'll click on magistration. And right here, as you can see, since we had already retrieved the criminal history, right here, it'll populate a PSR report, all of the previous offenses. And if you would like to view the full criminal history, you'll just click on view full criminal history. And it should populate a PDF. That's that, accept. And right here, it'll show the full criminal history. Then I'll ask you a couple of questions. Failures to appear, so I'll just put no and save that. And you'll answer those questions based off the summary that you were reviewing. And it explains the current offenses and then the conditions. So right here is the public safety report. Once this has been reviewed, thereafter you can create the bill form. That's going to be the following tab. So right here, either the judge themselves can create the bill form or they can have a user on their behalf input the information after they receive it. So we have the defendant name and the offense, and then we'll have the bill type, and we'll just fill that in for personal. We'll just put a bond amount in here, $100. Right here are listed the most common conditions, so you can go ahead and input the conditions that are needed for this bill form. If you do not need it, you can click on the red icon on the right and just delete it out. If there is a condition that's not listed here, you need to input it. There will be a column, a row at the bottom that says add another condition. And you'll enter that right there. Thereafter, you can certify the bill form. Since I'm acting as a judge, I can certify it myself. And like I said, if the user is certifying the bill form on behalf of the judge, it'll say the user's name, their title, and say certifying on behalf of Judge so-and-so. And thereafter, you'll just press complete. That's a sort of error. So let's see what did I miss up here? Oh, I'm sorry. Forgot the important information. You gotta put the magistration date at the top. So I'll just put today, and then we'll put today's time, 8 a.m., and then we'll just press complete. And it says the magistration is complete. And you can also view a PDF form. So you just click the print icon and click bill form. And so open the file. And there's the completed PDF version of the bill form. To go back and view all of the completed magistrations in your court, you'll just click home and click the complete magistrations, and it'll list all of the defendants that have been completed. So that's a quick overview to show how to input the defendant information in, run the Psr report, and then complete the bill form. One other item I do want to show you all is where we have our public information. So if you go to our OCA website and go to program and services and go on the Psr system at the very bottom, on the left-hand side, it says completed bill forms. So right here, if you click on bill forms, we have all of the completed up-to-date bill forms that are in public view. And like Alejandro said, this is updated nightly. And it could just, there you go. Sorry, it's a little delayed.
Alejandro, what does it say at the bottom of how many we
Sure.
have currently?
58,000.
So every completed bail form is on the website, you can search. If you're looking for a specific individual, or if you're looking for what a specific judge has been deciding, it's all on this website.
How would you search? Is it
Sure.
searchable like Westlaw?
So you can just search, if you have the name, the clause number, the location offenses, so these are our search icons that we have available to search by. And then I can click on view, we'll just view the first one if you'd like to take a look at it. So as Alejandro mentioned, we have redacted some information, but the main details are on there.
So is there a way to see like writ large? This judge is giving everybody condition. This judge is not giving anybody condition. This judge is.
To view by judge. So we cannot do that based off of the topics, the website, because this is just searching by defendant name. It can that be done in the system itself?
It could be data we could pull on the back end.
Yeah.
So if you're not familiar with how we've been doing bail, you should go watch about 5 or 6 videos of Judge Rosenthal's misdemeanor bail record. And I think you'll wonder what country you're living in. And really, is this the way we do it? And we're not even a fourth of the way through the 21st century, and we're actually going to have a workable bail system, which this group has been working on for 7 years. And went through 3 sessions, now this last time, special sessions. But again, if you see what's been happening and compare it to this and the information that's available to the magistrate to actually decide, is this person going to be a flight risk or safety risk? And this was invented from the ground up, starting last Labor Day. And it's just, I mean, I really think it's an amazing project. And I told Senator Harris the other day that I really do think this will have enormous impact on the criminal justice system. I know it's hard to pass, but it takes into account the low end of the bail for people who are non-violent, not a threat, and the people who are very much a threat to safety and flight risk. So it, there'll be kinks to get out. And judges being who they are, they sometimes get frustrated that the instruction doesn't go, the training doesn't go the way they thought, but we're working through all that. And I commend the judges that generally in their approach to the training, this is going to be good. I don't know how to do it. So Megan and I had some late night calls in March about whether we were going to finish it or whether we were going to say we couldn't and just leave the state. Unfortunately, we decided to stay. So it's a great presentation. Thank you for all
Thank
the
you.
work.
And I just wanted to add a couple more things. Sorry, Megan, if I forgot to point them out. But what some of the cool features in the system is that we have a live help desk. So if there is a user that has an immediate question, there is a chat person on the other side from our vendor that's able to help them instantly. And if it is out of hours, that they will receive an email saying what the error is, and then one of our vendor customer service members will contact them the next morning to resolve that issue. And I think that's it. I don't know if there's anything else, Alejandro, you wanted to add. Hopefully it kind of showed how efficient and fast it is, can be done. And I don't know if Megan, you want to mention some of the enhancements as we're working on.
The big enhancement is integration that we've been hearing a lot of counties or jurisdictions complaining about, is that they wanted this system to be integrated with their case management or their jail management system, and we're working on that. I actually just signed a change order last week to approve that and to get our vendor working on the API. And so we're hoping to have that available pretty quickly for counties, and that would reduce them entering it into two systems. They just have to enter it into one.
Well, great report. Thank you very much. Good to see it in front of us. Although we're going to have to see it in But that concludes our agenda. Now, where we are, so our committees have met and they're going to keep meeting. And if you be on any committee you want to, just tell Megan so we can get on the list. And even if you're not on a committee, and what you see today is prompted by ideas or other things come up. Like Chairman Lynch's question about leaks the other day, some things may come up. Just fire off an email to Megan or to your committee chair and make sure it gets on the list. Then we'll have a report back next time, I guess, on more concrete. This is what we're going to do. And we do that in the form of proposed legislation. And then we try to get the legislation drafted in the fall early enough so we're not scrambling around at the beginning of next year's session. Please register your views, add things, take things off, register concerns, whatever you think. So that we've got a good set of marching orders next time, and we'll be on our way. Yes, Senator.
I think we've done better and better in passing legislation, and the trick has been filing it early. Because ever since we started pre-filing in November, the pre-filing will begin November 10th. And before, the bills were filed so late that we didn't have enough time. I think we're going to change that. It's been easier, much easier to pass the legislation. It's still difficult, still challenging, but easier than it was before.
Right.
We do actually have one additional thing that's not on the agenda. I was going to recognize Senator Zaffaree.
Oh, thank you. Chief, the members of the Texas Judicial Council have signed this card for you as an expression of our appreciation for your leadership, because you have presided over our meeting so superbly and focused all of us through your leadership on every critical issue that is important to the judiciary. And I, from my perspective, appreciate your impact on the legislative process, because I know that when you speak, legislators listen, regardless of party. You are so respected and so admired. And it is because you have brought such national recognition to our state, specifically in the issue of access to justice, that it made all the difference in the world. And we believe very strongly that many, many lives of Texans have been improved because of your leadership. And for that reason, we would like to present you with a small gift, which we hope you will like.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
It's heavy.
Yes. Goodness.
Yes.
I see.
And it's Texas ironwood, handcrafted, and it has the Lone Star.
Wonderful.
of Texas. So we hope you will enjoy it.
Thank you very much. Thanks all.
Thank you for your time.
Well, thanks, and that's our meeting for today. Thanks to all the presenters. Thanks for Kelly, who helps to keep us all running. OCA staff, and so next meeting is September 30th. And unless anyone has anything else, we'll stay adjourned.